Welcome to Megaphone from Medvale Media. This is the place where we give big thinkers and thought leaders the opportunity to share their thoughts, their perspectives, and the occasional rant about the ever-changing world of healthcare. And today we are absolutely thrilled to welcome Dr. Paul DeChant, professor, author of Preventing Physician Burnout, speaker, high-level coach, and along with one of our other neighbors in Medvale, Bruce Cummings, the co-founder of Organizational Wellbeing Solutions. Some of your educational background, Dr. DeChant, I noticed was at Oregon Health Sciences University, OHSU in Portland. So I do have to ask you up front, are you a Portland Timbers soccer fan? Because if so, you and I have a separate conversation because I'm a solid Seattle Sounders fan.
I left Portland in 1980, so I don't
Good,
think that's an
good.
issue.
Well, we can talk about Trailblazers Sonics some other time, but first, welcome and thank you for joining us today. Would love to take a quick tour of the career of Dr. Paul DeChant. You started out in family medicine, correct?
Right, right. Yeah, family med doc. I graduated my residency from Greeley, Colorado, back in the Pleistocene age in 1983. Um, Worked a year in a small town ER in Colorado, 9 years with the Palo Alto Medical Foundation in Fremont, California. We were the first satellite office, helped open the first satellite office for the Palo Alto Clinic. Quickly became the medical director there because the original medical director left. Ultimately got onto the 9 years later, got onto the board of directors of the Palo Alto Clinic. And I looked around at the other people, all guys on the clinic board, and thought, nobody here has any business training. It's probably a good idea to get that. So I went to an American College of Physician Executives course. While I was there, I got an invite to work in Breckenridge, Colorado, and join a small group there. And that was pretty hard to pass up. So we packed up our 1 and 3-year-old daughters and moved to Breckenridge, where I got to spend 8 years as a small town family doctor, ER doctor at the base of the ski hill, and couldn't get administration out of my blood. So ended up merging 5 smaller groups into one large, medium-sized group of 30 providers. I got my MBA at University of Colorado, Denver at that time. And then Geisinger in central Pennsylvania offered me a
Sure.
position. And off we went there for 5 years. It brought us closer to my wife's mother. Thought this would be good for family. We were there 4 years, and then Palo Alto called up and said, "Hey, we're trying to expand our footprint, and we would love to have you be the person to lead that effort." So I came back to Palo Alto, opened up brand new offices in the East Bay, and also helped facilitate the merger of 3 large medical groups under the foundation into one large, really large medical group. From there, the opportunity opened up in the Central Valley of California, in Modesto and Stockton, to be the CEO at Sutter Gould Medical Foundation. And while it's kind of maybe a sideways move to go from the Bay Area to the Central Valley in many people's view, it was a great opportunity. This is a 300 physician group. They had a long history. They'd actually been originated by a couple of brothers that had trained at the Mayo Clinic, and they were performing at an average level. At that point, I realized I had the opportunity to truly do something as CEO, and learned about what ThedaCare was doing using lean in healthcare to improve the experience for doctors, staff, and patients. And so we employed the same consulting group that they had. And over 5 years, on a theme of returning joy to patient care, led a transformation. At the end of that time, we became recognized as the top performing group among 170 medical groups across the state of California 2 years in a row, and improved our physician satisfaction from the 45th up to the 87th percentile. At that point, I then actually went to work for Simpler, the lean consulting firm that had hired me, and spent 5 years working with health systems around the country as part of Simpler, helping the leaders there go through the same kind of changes that we had used at Gould to achieve the great success that we had. Simpler actually got acquired into IBM Watson Health. So I found myself
Really?
starting out as a small town. My aspiration initially in med school was to become some hippie doctor in the mountains in Colorado, mountains in Oregon or Colorado or somewhere. Here I am working for IBM. But it was it was exciting at the time. We were actually working on the ambient AI technology to take the discussion that happens in the exam room and turn it into a progress note.
And what
But
year was that?
that was 2019, 2018, 19.
Okay.
And we were ahead of our time. For some reason, IBM decided they didn't want to pursue that anymore, and they just canned the project. I have no idea why they did that. I was so excited. We were on the verge of the Holy Grail. And so I realized IBM wasn't for me, and I went out on my own right before the pandemic hit. So it was tough going trying to be a consultant when every health system was completely overwhelmed with other activities. And
Yes.
um, but over time, gradually kept at it and have had a moderate level of engagement and success in a variety of different organizations still working through, some of which are actually closely affiliated with Medvale. And I do a lot of public speaking. I've probably given 150 keynotes. I lead workshops. Bruce and I partnered with Bruce Cummings, fellow Medvalista, as you said. We've been working together for 5 years with this organ. Now we've got an LLC, Organizational Wellbeing Solutions, and our main focus there is on connecting senior leadership with frontline clinicians because that is such a deep root cause of so many problems. There's this mutual level of distrust and disrespect between those two entities in many healthcare organizations. And it doesn't have to be that way. And there's so many opportunities to address that.
I want to pick up on that theme a little bit later, but first of all, sounds like you went from the mountain time zone to the east time zone to the west time zone. So you're kind of time zone agnostic. You'll post up anywhere.
Yeah. I've got both both Pacific and Eastern time listed on my calendar. So I know I pretty much don't have a problem interpreting that.
Well, and leaving Breckenridge had to be a little tough when you're waking up every day looking at the ski hill, but that's probably a conversation for another time. With all of your background and experience, Paul, what led you to focus on physician burnout to begin with? Was there a triggering event? Was there something that you saw or experienced that said, I am one of these physicians and I see this issue. I'm going to take this on?
Yeah. I never had like a huge individual crisis. I know I was gradually burning out. I look back and, even in my first 9 years at the Palo Alto Clinic as a young family doctor, there were a couple of times I remember I was sitting in an exam room and I had a patient. I described my suburban practice in Fremont, perhaps a little crudely, as my amoxicillin and Prozac practice. Mostly people were young and healthy. Either would whatever they have is self-limited would get better no matter what we did, or it was chronic. It was somehow psychosocial related and was probably not going to get better. And I had this one patient who came in regularly and would just talk about her challenges. And at one point, I remember fantasizing about just saying, "Excuse me, my nurse is calling me," getting up, walking out, getting in my car and driving as far away as I could. I think that's a sign of burnout. I'm pretty sure that's a sign of
We can
burnout.
call that a sign of burnout. Yes.
Yeah. And then at Geisinger, in 2002, we introduced Epic. And that just rocked every doctor's world as we started to try to deal with this EHR beast, particularly back then, because there was so much work that the physicians themselves were doing, and the tools, the EHR at that time was still very crude. So that, and recognizing that really what we did was we just brought Epic in on top of the paper systems we had developed and hadn't truly redesigned the work to maximize the value of this new technology. And I became very involved. I actually started the Epic Optimization Committee at Geisinger because nobody else was doing it. And it was like, somebody's got to take this on. And during that time, I realized we really can redesign workflows. I started to learn about lean at that point. And then as things progressed, ultimately, I got really deeply introduced to lean and recognized that lean, when it's done properly, people think lean is all about efficiency. It's about some expert coming in and taking all the waste out of the system. And in fact, what lean is about is first principle is deep respect for people, because everybody doing a job knows what's wrong and has good ideas about how to fix their particular situation. And they rarely get the opportunity to actually try that out, put those
We're not
ideas
very good
into
at
action.
asking the people who do the business how to do it better.
Right, right, exactly. You get it. And that's where the opportunity lies. So it starts with respect for people, and as people feel respected when we introduce continuous improvement, they embrace it. In fact, and then the challenge becomes, how do you do that in a way that actually the organization stays whole, at the same time people become empowered? I like to describe my personal experience as, for 25 years practicing as a family doc, every day I wanted the empowerment to fix what was wrong in my office. When I became the CEO, all of a sudden I had 300 doctors, and I thought, man, if all of these 300 people are empowered independently, autonomously, the way doctors like to be, we could fall apart from entropy if we're not careful. And at that time, actually, when I became CEO at Sutter Gould, it was 2009. It was the depths of the Great Recession. We were $9 million in the hole. Unemployment in our county was 18%. And the pressure on me to turn this around from the people above me in Sutter Health, that pressure was intense. And it was very tempting to come in, issue mandates, and micromanage. But I knew in the long run that wouldn't pay off, that it would create a reputation for myself where I would be at odds with the physicians. And so we found this way to both help people understand it was okay to try their ideas. We trained them in how to do that effectively, because a lot of people don't know how to really solve problems. And we built a whole leadership process of moving towards of achieving the metrics that's were on the Sutter Health dashboard. Every health system has a dashboard.
Oh, yes.
It's got metrics, and if we're going to perform well, we have to achieve those. When we tie those metrics to the values that bring meaning to the work, those values we all share when we go into healthcare, you can really see direct lines between the values we share and the metrics we pursue if we put them together and educate people in that way. So at every office had its own individual dashboard of process metrics that helped contribute to the ultimate success of the outcome metrics at the system level. And we set it up so that in that daily huddle, people had a chance to look at those and see where they were doing well, where they weren't, where the opportunities were to make a difference. And built some meaningful bonusing into that so that the frontline folks had opportunities to improve that way. Developed our managers and leaders to become these kind of leaders who support their, instead of thinking of their people as their direct reports, who had, that they were holding accountable to achieve an outcome. We helped them think of themselves as the other people as their direct supports. Their job was to support them so they could be effective at doing the job that they were trying to do. And it's a whole array of those kind of activities that came together to make it work.
It's really what I hear you saying is something that we've talked about on this show before, and that's flipping the organizational chart upside down. The pyramid makes me
Mhm.
crazy. It really
Yes.
is the other way. It really should
Yeah.
look like this. So the leader with the biggest title is supporting the entire organization. And if we embrace that as leaders, it really focuses us and brings clarity to the idea of what you just talked about, that our job is to create the environment where people can excel.
So have you been looking at my slides, Dave? Because I have a,
No, but
I
I'd
have
like
a
to.
I have a slide that's essentially that. I lead into it asking who's the most important person in the healthcare system, which obviously it's the patient. If there's no patient, we have no reason to exist. We don't get paid.
Right.
There's nothing happens. Um, and then the question is, what's the most important thing that happens to that most important person, which is a healing interaction from everybody who touches the patient and the patient. It's not just doctor or nurse, it's receptionist, therapist, transport person, EVS person. Anytime someone encounters a patient, it's a chance to alleviate some anxiety or worry, relieve some suffering, do a procedure that's meaningful, educate people to be healthier. Those healing interactions happen hundreds of thousands of times a day in most health systems by the people that are interacting with the patient. So those are the people at the top of that inverted pyramid. And I went from being there, where in my career I probably had 100,000 healing interactions, to being at the bottom where I wasn't seeing patients anymore. My job became to make sure that people at the front line had what they needed so they could do those healing interactions as well as possible. That was the basic philosophy. And in fact, as CEO, my job was to make sure that the people between me and the front lines had what they needed so they could then support the people at the front lines.
No, very well said. And with respect, all due respect to the Philadelphia Eagles, healthcare is the ultimate team sport. So, regardless of who takes home the Vince Lombardi Trophy,
I'm
um,
with you.
it's easy for many people to point to the COVID-19 pandemic period and laser in as that being the cause of physician burnout. But you were really engaged in this area of study well before that. In fact, your book, Preventing Physician Burnout, Curing the Chaos, Returning Joy to the Practice of Medicine, was you wrote that in 2016? Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yes.
Well, there's no burying the headline with a title like that. That's one of the longest ones I've seen in a long time. But there appears to be a healthy dose of the lean methodology that you talked about in that work. And we see numbers relating to physician and provider burnout. Everything that I've seen from 2/3 to 3/4 of caregivers report some level of burnout. Is that something that you foresaw in 2016 when writing the book, or were you just really, really early and ahead of the curve?
Um, I don't actually, it was real back then. It was, the numbers were not that different back then. When I, like I said, when I started at Sutter Gould in 2009, I actually went to an AMGA quality leadership conference 2 weeks after I started. I'd already been signed up for it, so I just went. And that's where I got introduced to Theta Care and what they were doing with Lean to make things better. So we engaged in it then, recognizing at that point that the problem with burnout was basically, it wasn't the quality or the fulfillment of the actual work. We have amazing jobs as physicians. We get the opportunity. People come to us and share with us their deepest, darkest secrets they'll tell no one else because they trust us and know we have their best interest at heart. They let us cut them open. They trust us so much. We get to mentor young people as they become our colleagues, and we get to work on research and innovation and improvement. We have all these opportunities for professional fulfillment, but we only spend about a third of our time doing those things, and 2/3 of the time is wasted in administrivia, like data entry or fighting with an insurance company over prior authorization or any nut chasing all over the hospital or the clinic looking for supplies or equipment or support. And so that it's fixing that waste that was really the driver. Because if we can fix the workplace, then we reduce burnout. Doctors and nurses are some of the most resilient people in the world. There's studies that show that. And yet, quite often, when people start to work on burnout, the first thing we focus on is helping these highly resilient people become more resilient. When that's not the problem. The problem is the workplace itself. The jobs become undoable because of all this additional work that, frankly, much of it does not need to be done, certainly not by a physician. And redesigning things so that doctors can spend more time focused on what's professionally fulfilling really makes the difference. In fact, I think we're at a time, finally, um, where we can actually flip that ratio. So instead of only 1/3 of our time on professionally fulfilling activity, we can spend 2/3 of our time on professionally fulfilling activity, maybe a third of our time on necessary waste. But when we incorporate intentional redesign, daily management within the office, and all the new IT opportunities that AI is bringing us, and do those thoughtfully, we can really make that flip. And just imagine the potential of opportunity that gets released if suddenly we can go from 1/3 of our time doing what's really valuable to 2/3 of our time. What does that mean for quality, for access, for experience, for every stakeholder, for financial performance? I mean, it's to me, I feel like I'm on this mission to help people understand, help leaders understand this, because this is where their opportunity is, to truly make a difference and take their organization to the next level. When we started our lean journey at Sutter Gould, I had no idea that we would end up being rated the top performer among 170 groups 2 years in a row. That wasn't on our radar. In fact, we didn't even know the surveys were being done. It was done by Consumer Reports and the California Health Performance Information System.
Wow.
And one day, one of my doctors comes in with a Consumer Reports in his hand and says, "Hey, look at this. We're number one." We had no idea that that was even going on. We were just doing our thing and doing what we thought was right, and pursuing it with the effort we needed. And frankly, being in the Central Valley of California, we needed to do that, because if we didn't provide a great professional experience, the personal experience of living in the Central Valley is not the same as living in the Bay Area. And the Bay Area was close enough that we had intense competition for good quality physicians.
Well, you must have looked at our slide deck because you used one of my favorite words, administrivia, and it is something that driving it out of healthcare writ large benefits everyone. The patient, the consumer before they become a patient, the physician, the provider, whoever is administering claims. If we can reduce that and flip that script, as you talked about, change that ratio, it seems like that is the real goal. So when you say flip the ratio, what would be the roadmap to doing that? You touched on AI there, so unpack that a little bit for us, please.
Yeah. Well, if all we do is bring in AI and slap it on top of our current processes, we've done nothing much better than what we did back when we put the EHR on top of the paper process. It takes intentionally the redesigning, looking at the flow of whatever the activity is from start to finish, and doing the typical lean value stream map or analysis of every step in the process, with the stakeholders who are involved in the process all involved in identifying, and then creating new ways to go about things, testing them and implementing them. So it's a big picture redesign. It's a daily management approach at every unit, where and we it's commonly called the daily huddle. So many people have
Yes.
got this negative connotation of huddles. It's like, oh, here we got to go do the huddle again, because they haven't experienced a good huddle. But a great huddle actually addresses the drivers of burnout. And a great huddle should have four components. The first is a minute of just acknowledgement and appreciation, because everybody does great things to help each other out all day long. Rarely do we get
Sure.
the truly chance to appreciate it. And that just sets the huddle off positively and makes people realize, I do need to thank the folks I work with for what they've done. The next section is preparing for the day, looking at the demand coming at us with the census of the schedule versus the capacity we've got with staffing, with equipment, with supplies. Quite often we don't have the capacity for that day that's coming at us, but at least we can make contingency plans so we don't get as thrown off by something that might come up otherwise unexpectedly during the day. Next is looking at those metrics, process metrics at the front line. How are people doing? And that process metric might be something like filling in white spots in a schedule in order to help both improve access and improve productivity. That's something that the front line has control over, but it ultimately turns into an outcome metric at the top. And sometimes we're on track with where we want to be with that metric. That's great. Other times we're not. So we have to solve problems. And problem solving is the fourth step in the huddle. And it's, whether it's getting that metric back on track, or solving some little problem that went wrong that you have control over in the clinic. I opened up a drawer. What I needed wasn't there. I've got to run all over the place to find what I need. In a busy day, that'll irritate a doctor or nurse pretty intensely, and they'll swear they don't want it to ever happen again, but by the end of the day, they've forgotten about it because there's too many other things that happen.
Right.
And then until next week when it happens again, and then they're even more upset. If when that little thing happens, it gets stuck on the huddle board, so that the next morning the team can look at it and say, "Hey, this happened to so and so. This is something we all want to work on." And if people agree, then we set up a little team, work on it, come back with a solution a few days later, test it, and see those little pebble in your shoe kind of problems. That as we take those out bit by bit, it gets easier and easier to go along. So those daily huddles are really key. And then in an advanced group, that daily frontline huddle is followed by tiered huddles up the levels to the C-suite. And so the C-suite knows what's going on. There's communication about issues on a regular basis to the C-suite, as well as communication back from the C-suite and support back from the C-suite out to the front line around what are the major initiatives, what are we thinking, and how are we approaching these issues to help out. And then we can use AI with whether it's lean innovation or design thinking or whatever you want to call the improvement process. I honestly don't care. I think at the heart of them, they're basically all the same. And so people who get into arguments about is it design thinking or lean, I think are wasting their time. We need to just do that improvement work.
Right.
Um, but when we put that improvement work into place, then we can find new ways to do things based on this new opportunity with the technology.
So if we review that quickly, it's, applying technology to bad process just gets you faster bad process.
If we don't redesign. Yeah.
Right, right. Um,
Right. Mhm.
Setting aside the tyranny of time for a minute, the huddle concept and taking it up to leadership is something a little new, at least to my thinking. But worry a little less about how much time it takes and look at it as an investment and the ability to achieve the goal. Is that a
Yeah,
fair synopsis?
that's a very perceptive question. Because so many people, the cynical physician, and there's plenty of them, um, will come to us and say, wait a minute, you're telling me you want me to be more productive. Now you're telling me to come to this damn huddle for 15 minutes. I could be seeing a patient during that time. Which is it? What do you want? Well, it turns out where there's effective huddles happening on a daily basis, those units are far more productive, excuse me, than the places that don't huddle. So you can take that 15 minutes and keep doing ineffective things, or you can help yourself become far more effective the rest of the time.
One of the things that I picked up from your website is the concept is pretty well ingrained in healthcare, no margin, no mission, but you propose that it's no mission, no margin. What help us understand that. Unpack that one a little bit for us.
Well, so one of the key drivers of burnout is that sense of inefficacy, like I'm not making any difference.
Sure.
And we all go into healthcare very mission driven to start with. But along the way, it's very hard to hang on to that notion as we get caught up in our day to day and all the demands and everything. And so, bringing that back, making sure people are connected to that is very important. It's a significant driver of burnout. When people are mission driven, it's rarely many people talk about going to work spending some time in volunteer work in a place that doesn't have the resources we have.
Right.
And I've done that myself. And in those times, oftentimes you're working way harder than you are in your regular job, or at least as hard. But people rarely report burnout in those situations because the mission aspect is so strong. So that's and as leaders, another opportunity we have is to make sure we are all connected to that mission and understand how important that is. Um, there's another mission I think in healthcare that we miss. And this struck me when I first joined Simpler, the lean consulting firm. They sent me to this conference, the Association for Manufacturing Excellence. And I thought, what the heck am I doing going to this conference? I'm in healthcare. We have a noble mission. These people make garage doors and widgets. What am I going to learn here? And I went to there was a panel sponsored by Bob Chapman, who's the CEO of this company called Barry Wehmiller. They're heavy equipment manufacturers and make bottle washers for Budweiser and stuff like that. They're international. They've got at least 80 plants in 20 countries around the world. And he um, used lean, particularly that respect for people, as a key to turn around his organization. And he's written a book called Everybody Matters: The Incredible Power of Treating Your People Like Family, where he learned to implement that and realized he had so much power, but he had so much potential to make the lives of all of his employees far better if he could create this culture where everyone cared about each other within the organization. And I came away, and it was not just him. There were, groups that his organization had like 3,000 employees, but there were organizations with 30 or 40 employees. I came away from that humbled because I realized that while we have this noble mission in healthcare to care for patients, we're often so harsh on each other inside of healthcare, particularly for doctors. Our acculturation process of going through training and going on rounds and being pummeled on rounds with questions of minutia in order to help us feel inadequate so that we'll theoretically study harder. There's something crazy about it all. We have very little tolerance for errors and mistakes. We've started to change that culture some, but still the pervasive culture is far harsher than it is in many of these manufacturing organizations that have figured this out and adopted it. And it, again, doesn't have to be that way, and it helps. It creates a level of psychological safety that then fosters innovation, fosters the ability of somebody to speak up if they're concerned about a potential safety issue. That it's another opportunity we have to really make a change in the culture of healthcare.
Well, thank you for helping us get a deeper understanding of that. When you were talking about physician rounding, I thought for a minute you were talking about Catholic school. But yeah, I say that humbly as a veteran of 12 years of being humbled myself in that process. But I want to read this because I want to get it correct. A statement on the Organizational Wellbeing Solutions website states, the rapidly changing healthcare environment is straining relationships between clinicians and administrators, leading to staffing shortages, financial challenges, and unprecedented burnout. Seems like quite a bold statement. Almost feels like the administrators are primarily to blame for the woes of health systems and hospitals. And within our Medvale community, we've got equal measure of accomplished physician leaders. We have administrators and all sorts of other folks as well. Um, can you help us understand what is behind what appears to be a pretty bold statement?
Yeah. Um, well, so I think within Medvale, even the physicians are in leadership positions. So leaders are leaders, whether they're physician or not. Um, well, we're not responsible for all of the challenges because we live in this external environment, and it's the external environment that impacts the workplace. Um, we are responsible for how we react to that external environment. And this is the opportunity, is how we deal with that. Yeah, there's tremendous pressure on everyone in leadership positions. And many, I'm going to talk a little bit about the drivers of burnout because this relates directly to management and leadership. There's three dimensions to burnout: exhaustion, cynicism, and inefficacy. And the Maslow and Leiter, the researchers who identified these over 40 years ago, also found these six drivers of burnout, which they describe as job person mismatches. The first one is work overload. There's just too much to do. And they
Sure.
show that drives exhaustion. Well, stop the press is a big deal. We could all figure that one out. Overload drives exhaustion. Um, and there's where we have so much opportunity to take waste out and make a difference. And that's where most people stop thinking about burnout. But what they also showed is that there's five other drivers of burnout. The next is a lack of control, which certainly autonomy is important to doctors, but really it's important to everybody. Next is insufficient reward, recognition, appreciation. We all thrive on that, whether we admit it or not. Next is breakdown of community, our collegiality and connectedness. And that was a problem before the pandemic, certainly was huge during the pandemic because we all had to separate. But even now, when we come together, often people are spending more time looking at their devices than each other when they're together in a room.
True.
Um, Next is absence of fairness. If your opportunities are limited based upon not your contribution to the organization, but based on your gender, your race, your country of origin, your sexual orientation, that's just patently unfair. And then for most of us, the jobs we thought we were entering into are completely different than what we're doing now. It feels like a big bait and switch. And lastly, conflicting values. If my personal values are not aligned with the values of the organization, or the work I do has to in some way violate my own values, which happened a lot during the pandemic simply because there were not the resources we needed. That absence of fairness and values conflicts are at the root of moral injury, which gets talked a lot about in healthcare these days as well. But those five drivers: control, reward, community, fairness, and values, Maslow and Leiter show those drive cynicism, and they have all to do with how you lead. When you lead in ways that make those worse, you're a micromanager and you drive cynicism. But we have the opportunity to lead in a way that actually minimizes those by empowering people and aligning them. And that's where we get huge engagement. Most people, when they get into their roles of working their way up the leadership structures, they haven't had a mentor that actually helps them understand this. And they learn from someone who became a micromanager because they learned from another micromanager. So we've got this
Right.
micromanagement mindset within healthcare. Damn it, just do your job and achieve the results. This is what we need. And don't tell me how you did it, just get it done. Um, and we have such an opportunity to change that and to really understand that everybody has this opportunity to get empowered and use that empowerment to align around our common purpose. And that it takes time, it takes a different education, it takes a different mindset, but it has to start at the top of leadership. If the CEO is not deeply engaged in this, then people who don't want to change will wait it out. They'll think it's the next thing, management thing of the month, and they'll
Flavor of
wait
the
it
month.
out. But
Right.
if you see the CEO actively saying, hey, this is what we are doing, we are committed to it, it diminishes that resistance, and we have a much better opportunity to drive change.
Breaking down the initial walls of resistance is elemental to any sort of sustainable
Yeah,
change. And
yeah,
so what you just described makes great sense, certainly in healthcare and really in the rest of our lives and other industries as well.
yeah.
Paul, you've touched on a couple of things where we included nurses and other members of the care team. Your focus is really around physicians, but at least in this conversation, I think it's safe to extend that to everyone in that care team because the case is easy to make that nurses and anyone really attached to that patient experience, trying to make people better, feel better, get better, live healthier lives, that it's impacting them as well. So, is this a cascade effect that really begins, as you say, even with the CEO? But if we can get our physician community to really embrace what you're talking about, is there a reflected positive impact on the rest of the care team?
Well, as you said, healthcare is the ultimate team sport. I don't know where, I don't even know that we have to start at physicians. Certainly in Sutter Gould, we had 25 specialties, 30 some different locations and offices. And depending on the office, some of it started with the supervisor in that office more so than the physician. You need that one person who gets it, who has the spark, who can help spread it through the rest of the organization or the rest of their local unit to make it happen. We wrote the book for physicians for a couple of reasons. Back then, physician burnout, there were 54% of physicians were burned out back in 2015, 16. Um, and and certainly went up to some during the pandemic. It's actually starting to go down now. One of my new jobs, I'm working 20% as employed by the AMA as a senior director and educator. And the AMA does these organizational biopsies. They've got about 150 healthcare organizations around the country that they're assessing around burnout and its drivers. And we're starting to see a decrease. Yeah, the organizations that are engaged in this work and this meaningful work, we're starting to see them actually come down. So it's now just under 50% of
That's
physicians.
very positive.
Yeah, but it was the physicians were the that were most talked about at that time. It is really true. In fact, so at that time, administrators burnout level was about the same as the general public. That was the studies that were done to compare physicians to the general public. Now, administrators are burned out at the same rate as the physicians. So congratulations to us all.
Yay!
We're all dealing with it.
We're all in the same boat. We
Yeah.
should probably row together.
Yeah.
Uh, so it has become tradition on Megaphone to ask our guests their favorite things. I like to take notes on your favorite dining experience there in Arroyo Grande in the Central Coast of California. So if you could share one of those or whatever you like to do, if it's kicking around the beach, whatever it is, what does Dr. Paul DeChant enjoy doing in the Central Coast of California?
Yeah, thanks. We moved here about a year and a half ago, and we struggled to find a house, but we found a great place. And I'm sitting here in my home office right now, but if I look just to the left, I'm looking out at the ocean. I have a horizon view of the ocean here, and it takes us about under 10 minutes to get to the beach and to have a great walk on the beach. And it is amazing. The beach is different every single day. It's never been the same any 2 days that we've been there. Um, so that's probably when I think about simple favorite things to do. That's definitely it. There's some, there's some great restaurants here. There's a lot of okay restaurants. And we're close to San Luis Obispo, the town itself, which has Cal Poly. They have a wonderful farmers market. If you ever come on a Thursday night, go to downtown San Luis Obispo, and there's about 4 blocks that get blocked off, and it's just food vendors and other vendors and musicians and a whole crew, community of people out there wandering and enjoying, and that's a real experience in and of itself. And there's wineries around. There's many wineries around here. There's just a
Now
whole.
you have my attention.
And the beautiful thing, I shouldn't say this because we'll get too crowded. It's not crowded. There's no 6-lane freeways here. There's 2 lanes each direction, except for one small section where one side is 3 lanes. That's the most congested it gets. And if we slow down for 5 minutes on the freeway, we're pretty frustrated by that. So compared to living in the Bay Area where I was for many, many years, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, that's not traffic at all. Well, Paul, thank you so much. We always give our guests the last word. What will you leave us with today?
I think that leadership, 2 things. One is lean can be the antidote to burnout when senior leaders fully embrace it. There's so many things we haven't talked about that are in a full lean management system. I'm happy to talk to anyone who's interested about that to really help them see the opportunities and understand that better. And when we do that, we talk about there's so much waste in healthcare, and there's plenty of external drivers of that waste, but we have internal waste as well. And for us to be wasting those dollars when they could be going to providing better care instead, I think is a deeply lost opportunity that we all have to think about very carefully and commit to making a difference.
Well, Paul, thank you. I did notice at the very bottom of your personal website an invitation that anyone that's interested in this topic is welcome to reach out to you. What's the best way for them to do that?
So my email, paul@pauldechantmd.com, is it's probably the best. For Medvale, I'll share my phone number. You can text me, 209-505-9862. I'm happy to talk to anyone.
Terrific. Well, Dr. DeChant, thank you so very much for investing the time with us today. It's been fascinating. I'm sure it won't be the last time we have an opportunity to talk. I know that you and I are going to have to make a date for this fall when I can come down. We'll visit some of the wineries. It'll be a Thursday night. We're going to hit that farmer's market and check out the food vendors. So thank you for joining us today. Our guest today has been Dr. Paul DeChant on Megaphone from Medvale Media. You can learn more at medvale.com. I'm Dave Self. Be well.